The events of Silent Hill 1 are confusing to say the best. Harry goes looking for his daughter, uncovers a cult in the cursed city of Silent Hill. Then there's a crazy woman who yells about gyromancy.
I've been expecting you. It was foretold by Gyromancy.
What are you talking about?
Then there's the cop who gives Harry her gun.
Have you got a gun?
No.
Take this, and hope you don't have to use it.
There's the knife-wielding murder children. But what's really going on? There's got to be some point to all this madness and confusion, right? I think there is. Yes, there's Alyssa and the cult in the other world. We will talk about those things. But those things aren't the story. Those are window dressing for the story. The story is about a man looking for his daughter. This story is about Harry. Let's try to make sense of it. A disclaimer first. I'm approaching Silent Hill as if the year is 1999 and no other Silent Hill media exists. I'm looking at the story and the lore as a brand new, wide-eyed fan. I am looking at how the first game stands on its own. The fear of blood tends to create fear for the flesh as our introduction to Silent Hill. The quote is cryptic, open to interpretation, just like the game. The quote has words in it that concern life and death, blood, flesh, fear. We'll come back to this quote later. We learn from the instruction manual that Harry is 32, a writer, and an only parent. He is taking his daughter Cheryl on a lakeside vacation to Silent Hill. On the drive to the resort town, he sees a mysterious figure in the road, swerves, and wrecks. He is knocked out. When he comes to, Cheryl is missing, and his car no longer works. Harry's quest begins here. Find Cheryl. At this point, if you're experienced with narratives, you'll be asking yourself, is this one of those it's all a dream scenarios? Is Harry unconscious in his car or on a hospital bed? Is Harry dead? I have to stop and say here that going into this, I thought the story of Silent Hill was going to be not great. I expected confusion. I expected the writers flailing, throwing stuff at the wall, and seeing what sticks. And yeah, there's a bit of that. But overall, things are okay and clear enough, especially when it comes to Harry. So the start of the game, when you take control, is pure confusion. You see a little girl, you run down an alley, you're attacked by 3-foot creatures with knives. You wake up in a diner with a cop, Sybil, who gives you her gun. Then you're attacked by a gargoyle? So anyway, you go back to that alleyway and see a sketchbook that gives Harry the idea that Cheryl has gone to school. Because that's where all kids want to go, right? When I got to the school, I started to think I had the story figured out, or at least I thought I knew what the monsters were and why Harry was in a school of all places. I thought Harry was hallucinating, and these monsters, the little guys with knives, represented his fears about his daughter and being a single parent. Kids can be mean. Kids can bully. And in my mind, Harry was fighting the bullies away from Cheryl. Even these other ghost kids who are harmless and make pathetic noises seem to support my idea. These see-through ghosts are what Harry is afraid will happen to Cheryl. That some part of her will fade away after being bullied if he, Harry, isn't there to protect her. I mean, check out the school bathroom where a girl cries. It's actually pretty sad. And I started to really feel for Harry here. Then there's this puzzle where the old man's hand won't let go, which at the time I thought described Harry perfectly. Then Harry gets the call saying, "Daddy, help me," which is a call you can imagine a bullied girl wanting to make. Harry even has to slay a dragon in the boiler room. Slaying the dragon is a common protector motif. You slay the dragon for your princess. Cheryl is his princess. My theories seem to fit except for the wheelchairs in the other world. The wheelchairs really threw me. They're everywhere. I wondered at first if it had something to do with Harry's wife. Perhaps she had been in a wheelchair before she died. Perhaps the empty wheelchair represented the absence of his wife and Cheryl's mother. After you beat the dragon in the basement, you see the ghost girl who caused you to wreck. Then she does her magic trick and disappears, which she will do an awful lot in this game. After the church bells ring, after we run across town and enter the church, we see one of the memeiest scenes in the game.
I've been expecting you. It was foretold by Gyromancy.
What are you talking about?
So being that I do too much research, I had to look up Gyromancy and see what it was all about. The Wikipedia page is only a paragraph long, and when I searched academic databases in my state library for books or articles on Gyromancy, all I found was an article about a woman who used asparagus to predict the queen's death. So I tracked down the Wikipedia source for Gyromancy, read the half paragraph about it, and here's what it is. Someone walks around a circle with letters on it until they collapse on a letter. That's their letter. Then they get up and do it again, on and on until, quote, death or madness intervened. So that's cool. I guess the circle she walked around was the same circle we saw at the school. And I guess it spelled out Harry. So she tells us we have to use something called Floros to open a path. I looked up Floros as well. It's from an old witchcraft book. It's a demon that has to be confined to a triangle to keep it from lying. This thing, though, is not a triangle. It has triangles on it, and I guess that's good enough for Dahlia. There is this cool symbol associated with it, but I don't think that this symbol is in the game. Clearly, to me, Dahlia is some kind of mentor or guide in this story. Usually in stories, there's a character who knows what's going on and shows up to explain things. Yoda in Star Wars is a good example. So is Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. Harry's guide just happens to be a woman who's spun around too much. Dahlia tells us to go to the hospital, but she doesn't say why. But then again, Harry really has no choice but to go off of what she says. At the hospital, we meet this guy with a gun, Kaufman. Now, while I'm listening to the dialogue between Harry and Kaufman, what jumps out at me is the mention of Harry's wife.
Your wife, she's here with you?
She died 4 years ago. Now it's just me and my daughter.
Up to this point in the game, I don't think she's been mentioned, and here in the hospital she is. That made me think the hospital had something to do with Harry's wife. Perhaps she died in the hospital. Perhaps Harry blamed the nurses and doctors for her death. That would explain the enemies here. I was thinking at this point, Harry is battling his own past. He's confronting the death of his wife, and that still could be possible. The other canon explanation does not preclude this one. One of the things you find in the hospital is a videotape, but when you pop it in to watch it, it's corrupted, just like everything else in Silent Hill. In the dark basement, we find this hospital bed. We also find this photo of a girl, Alessa. This has to be important, but I'm not sure why yet. Later, we meet Lisa. At this point, I'm confused. I start wondering if Lisa is some kind of stand-in for Harry's wife. Then I start to think, well, maybe Lisa was someone who took care of Harry's wife, and Kaufman was someone who didn't take care of Harry's wife. This would create some good tension. As soon as Harry thinks about the basement, he gets a headache and passes out. When he wakes up, look who shows up. It's our favorite Dizzymancer. She says more nonsense, and at this point I'm so confused by the story that I'm starting to doubt its coherence. We end up running to an antique shop, passing out after seeing an altar and waking back up in the hospital. Then later we wake back up in the antique shop? What is Harry's wake-up counter at? Sometimes a story can lay too much confusion on the player or reader, and this is that point for this game. Did we actually go to the antique shop? Did Dahlia really say those things to us? It's unclear. While we were in the antique shop, we ran into Sybil. Sybil mentioned that there was a drug problem with the town, and I was totally on board with her. I didn't think anything else could explain the game up to this point except for drugs. But if the things Harry were seeing were in some way caused by the drugs, how was he consuming them? Maybe it's the random health drinks he's picking up. I don't know. Sybil also saw a girl running toward a lake, seemingly on air. Surely that won't be important later. After we wake up in the hospital, I'm not sure about the tense here. Lisa gives us a lore dump about the town. She said there used to be a cult and that Dahlia's kid died in a fire. Finally, we're at the antique shop and awake. In the town center, we see that Cheryl is in some sort of trouble. Then we fight a larva? I guess this makes sense. I mean, a larva is a young thing, and Cheryl is young. But the fight doesn't make as much narrative sense as the lizard in the school basement. We run back to the hospital to talk to Lisa for like the 4th time in less than an hour. She tells us how to get to the lake through the waterworks, which is back near the elementary school. When we leave, we fight a giant moth. I guess the larva grew up. The whole thing seems like a they grow up fast joke. While I'm running around in the sewers, I'm wondering what on earth the sewers are doing as a location. What narrative sense does this place make? The antique shop made sense in that relics of the past are kept there, and that Dahlia ran the store. As the game seems to play with gothic horror tropes, mysterious past, town secrets, familial drama, an antique shop fits right in. But a sewer? Why? Oh, and no, we're not doing that here. My theory about the events in this game all being in Harry's head or a manifestation of Harry's fears fell apart about here. Unless...
I've been expecting you. It was foretold by Gyromancy.
At this point, the only way I could see the rest of the events in this game being in Harry's head is if Harry is writing the events of Alessa and the cult as a novel. In the manual for the game, Harry's profession is listed as writer, and we can't ignore the street names in the game, all named for writers that Harry could have very much taken influence from in his writing career. Dean Koontz and Michael Crichton. If this theory were true, Harry's journey from just looking for his daughter to stopping a cult, then the bleeding of Harry's own fiction into his psychological drama could have made for a good story. But I don't think there's enough evidence for that to be true. The next part of the game has an optional quest where you save Kaufman from a monster, find some drugs in the town, and find Kaufman's secret demon sauce in a motorcycle. When I first found this motorcycle, I thought there might be an ending where Harry just nopes out of Silent Hill on the back of the motorcycle, but that is not the case. When Harry crosses the bridge near the lighthouse, it's clear by his dialogue that he's reached a kind of point of no return. You eventually meet Sybil again in a little boat. Harry is so convinced by what he says here that I can't help but believe that this is what's actually going on. Another world is invading the real world. Dahlia shows up and confirms this. At the lighthouse, not a lot happens. We see Alessa disappear again, and here's that symbol again. I guess the idea of having us see this was that the whole town was really in trouble, or that the signal is being broadcast from here. We end up going back to the boat and then going to the amusement park ourselves. This whole part feels rushed. At the amusement park, we end up having a confrontation with a possessed and or drugged Sybil. If you did the necessary steps to save Sybil here, you learn some very important details about Harry and Cheryl. Harry and his wife found Cheryl abandoned on the side of the road. It's actually been pretty hard for me to tell how different Alessa looks from Cheryl apart from their clothes, because the PS1 did not yet have the tech to show good in-game detail besides the cutscenes. I mean, look at Sybil here. But Harry always seems to know when he's talking to Alessa. It's just a bit unclear to the player as we're already mired in confusion. So yeah, there's a bit of mystery on how this whole thing started, but we've got it mostly figured out. We have to get Cheryl back from the evil cult, and in doing so, we have to save the world, or something. Another confusing scene happens. Alessa shoots us with her finger gun, and then the Floros comes alive and knocks her down. Dahlia of the Dancing Asparagus shows up and she confirms that she is Alessa's mother. Then we get a fade to black, and we wake up in... After this scene with Lisa, which is still rather cryptic for it being at the end of the game, she runs off. A lot of this next part is puzzles and rooms that we've already encountered. This whole area seemed a lot to me as if we were inside someone's head, browsing their memories. When finally you enter the room with all the drawings of the room where Alessa's clothes are hanging on the wall, it's very clear that this space belonged to Alessa. There's a cutscene where Lisa dies, but her role is still uncertain until you see the scene of all the characters around the hospital bed. Then we know she was the nurse who cared for Alessa. So remember when Dahlia's daughter died in a fire? Yeah, she didn't die. That was Alessa. And it's explained here that Alessa's pregnant. Whatever her baby is can't be good, and we learn that half her soul is missing. So we can guess that Cheryl, the girl Harry found on the side of the road, is somehow the other half of Alessa's soul. Looks like Kaufman was in the cult along with Dahlia. I find Kaufman seems to be the one to pin for the drug problem, but he only seems complicit in these cult shenanigans. Dahlia seems to be the driver of the cult. I think the idea was that Kaufman kept some kind of control over Lisa with drugs as her dealer and boss, which had to have made Lisa's life very difficult. Don't worry though, Lisa will get her revenge soon. Check out the penultimate room. Remember that Moth boss? Remember the flying creatures and the evil dogs? Yeah, those were twisted versions of things Alessa either created or enjoyed in her life. Any doubts we had left that this was all Dahlia's doing are erased when we see this cutscene where Dahlia forces Alessa to participate in the cult.
No! I don't want to do it! It will make everyone happy, and it's for your own good, too.
There's a few endings. They seem largely the same narratively to me. Dahlia does her evil bad guy speech. She even thanks Harry for bringing the other half of Alessa's soul to her. Note that Dahlia mentions something that suggests Harry has been seeing Cheryl when he thought he was seeing Alessa. Depending on what side quest you've done, the endings vary slightly here. Regardless, you fight the combined version of Alessa and Cheryl. In the good ending, after you defeat a boss who looks remarkably like a Baphomet, Alessa passes you a baby, which I guess is supposed to be a newborn Cheryl or something. The game ends with Harry running off into the fog with a child. If you save Sybil, she runs along with you. Also, we see Lisa drag Kaufman down. Good job, Miss Garland. If you get the bad ending, there's no baby Cheryl and Harry wakes up in his car, the whole thing having been a dream. I'm a fan of the bad ending. Remember when I said perhaps the whole occult arc was Harry's fiction bleeding over into his psychological insecurities about being a single father? What if in the bad ending, after Harry woke up, he looked over in the seat beside him, saw a sleeping Cheryl, and in her arms was a copy of a book Harry had written called Silent Hill. Anyway, it also adds to the wake-up counter. The good ending kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Sure, Harry has a new appreciation for life and he has a little girl, but what about his Cheryl that he had all those memories of? Does this new child have the same memories? It's unclear. So remember I said that we had come back to that quote at the start of the game. The fear of blood tends to create fear for the flesh. That quote's about Alessa, I think. The fear of blood refers to her mother Dahlia. It's her fear of her own mother that created all these nightmares. So is the story in Silent Hill 1 good? Mostly. Some of the characters lack development and motivation. I think the story could have been a bit better if things were fleshed out more. But then again, that's the reality of making a game in the real world. There are deadlines, there are budgets, there were hardware limitations, especially at the time this game was made. The game itself though, the environments, the atmosphere, the soundtrack, the monster design are all amazing. So we're getting a remake of Silent Hill 2 soon, and it's understandable why Silent Hill 2 is being remade rather than Silent Hill 1. The narrative in Silent Hill 2 is much stronger. The aura of strangeness works much better in that one, which is focused solely on James Sunderland and his past. But if the remake does well, could we see a remake of this game? It's possible. And I think it's possible to flesh out this story or alter it a bit to make it a stronger, more impactful narrative. What will Gyromancy foretell? We will have to wait and see.
What are you talking about?